whether the company is doing enough to protect its employees. SeaWorld had appealed citations from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, over the death of trainer Dawn Brancho in 2010. You remember she was dragged into the water by a 22-foot whale named Tillicum. Now, in the new decision, a judge upheld safety violations against the park and said that OSHA's recommendation to use physical barriers to protect trainers is feasible. But the ruling also says SeaWorld didn't intentionally act with the disregard, that its violation wasn't, quote, willful, and they reduced the fine against SeaWorld. A statement from the park says, in part, we have maintained all along that the allegations of willful were meritless and are vindicated that the judge agreed. Joining me now live is Jack Hanna, Director Emeritus of the Columbus Zoo, and David Kirby, author of the book Death at SeaWorld. So, Jack, what do you make of this ruling? I mean, do you think it's going to hurt SeaWorld and how they do business?
Well, they had a record year last year, but irregardless of the record year, which I read in the press release just now, forget the record year. I do know that the trainers, I know them all very well. Dawn was a friend of mine. I had to do her funeral. So that obviously was very difficult. If you talk to her parents, you talk to people that are the trainers, they're not forcefully told to go be a killer whale trainer, number one. Number two, real quickly, Anderson, the judge says here, Ken Walsh upheld the federal safety violations against the theme park for exposing employees to serious injury or death. Now, Anderson, you and I both know how many businesses that apply to, how many jobs in this country, thousands of them. I mean, I can't believe that statement. We're all exposed to Anderson. I didn't take this job 40-something years ago to work with animals to expose myself and my keepers here, 1,400 employees here at the Columbus Zoo, to expose anybody to death or injury. And I know from my heart that SeaWorld does not do that as well, or the people that no one's forced to go in with those whales, by the way. This is an honor. This is like an astronaut, as far as I'm concerned, what these folks do to bring education to these billions of people in the last 40-something years that have seen these whales.
David, the judge ruled that the OSHA recommendations that SeaWorld basically use these barriers to try to protect trainers was feasible. What does that exactly mean?
That means it's possible for SeaWorld to continue its performances with the the trainers out of the water. What the judge said was he agrees with OSHA that being in close proximity to these top predators is too dangerous, and therefore there needs to be some type of protection for these workers.
So they won't then be getting in the water, riding on the whales, things like that?
Well, they will be. SeaWorld is going to put trainers back in the water very soon. They're already putting in preparations to do that, but OSHA has said it is not really feasible to have trainers in the water with these top predators unless you have certain measures in place. Mm-hmm. And SeaWorld says the measures they're going to use are things like a fast-rising bottom of the pool to beach a whale that is rampaging perhaps with a trainer in its mouth, and spare air oxygen systems. But I don't think OSHA is going to agree that that is equal protection compared to keeping trainers out of the water completely.
Jack, Dawn Brancho, as you said, she was a friend of yours. She died doing this work. You say that this was her legacy and should continue. Why? Because there's some folks who, you know, Jack, who see these whales in these small enclosures and say, this isn't right.
But Anderson, I've been out there in the wild with the killer whales all over the world. No matter what anybody says, you can do all the research you want to in the wild, Anderson, but what SeaWorld has found out through their research, their artificial insemination and breeding, what they've learned over the last 40 years is invaluable to the survival of the killer whale in the wild. It's amazing that 41 years ago, when they were killing killer whales, selling permits for them, the SeaWorld got a permit to save 6 killer whales or whatever their number was, I'm not sure. And that today, about 95% of their whales, or maybe 99% of their whales, I think 1 or 2 are left, maybe 1 from the wild from all those years ago. So, you know, I don't buy that, Anderson. I don't see any whale. Trust me, I've been going to SeaWorld since they opened in Orlando with my little girls back since 1973 or 4, I think it was, when they opened down there. And it's one of the most highlight things of our life. I think if you look at the 176 million people who went to zoos and aquariums last year, or the billions of people who went to SeaWorld, I think they'll tell you what they want to see. It's not a matter of them going there to watch a killer whale injure or kill somebody. That's not why people go to SeaWorld. They go to see the glory and the magnificence of this animal, of them spy hopping, doing a lot of behaviors that I've seen in the wild. I've been out there, Anderson, for 30-something years. I'm not making this up. I know what I see. I know how SeaWorld treats their whales. And by the way, Dave, his book, by the way, on the, I think it was called the Animal Factory. And I want Dave to know that I worked very hard with the state of Ohio agriculture to make sure that the chickens were lowered, or the cages, to make sure that the veal were in bigger enclosures. We worked very hard with the agriculture, with Wayne Purcell with HSUS, to make sure in his book there how to do that. So I must say that, David, I do everything I can to make sure that animals don't suffer. But there are animals that I know of in this zoological park or throughout SeaWorlds Nothing suffers. Plus, no one mentions the millions of dollars SeaWorld spends every year, Anderson, on rehabbing the manatee, rehabbing whales, rehabbing sea turtles. Millions of dollars.
David, I just want to
Well, there's a lot to respond to, Jack. Thank you for. I'm glad you support restrictions on factory farming and you support animal welfare. I think that's one reason why people criticize keeping killer whales in captivity. And I think it's important to note that the research that goes on in SeaWorld, I haven't really seen very many published peer-reviewed studies that will support the well-being of killer whales in the wild.
Bottom line, Jack, David, do you think trainers can be in the water safely with killer whales?
I leave that to the U.S. government. They say no. My question is whether killer whales should be in captivity, period.
Right.
And my conclusion after doing all my research is that no, it's not.
We got to leave it there. David Kirby, I appreciate it. Jack Hanna as well. More ahead. I'll be right back.